Hey, this is Chris with Rekkid Talk, and so this week, instead of picking my own topic, I'm going to let somebody else pick my topic. So I'm going to participate in a thread. So this is Christian. Right now, he's going by front to back vinyl, and of course, we know Christian. He shows us all the Eddie Grant albums, all the Juliana Hatfield albums. In case you don't watch my channel, you can see him on his channel. But what he tasked us to do was to show three artists, three albums from three different decades. And the way Christian started his video, he did Bob Dylan, and he showed the first Bob Dylan album he showed was from the year he was born. Well, I'm not going to do Bob Dylan, but I'm going to do a band called Crazy Horse. And Crazy Horse did a bunch of albums with this fellow named Neil Young, who had been in a band called Buffalo Springfield and a band called CSNY. But anyway, so Neil Young with Crazy Horse. So everybody knows this is Nowhere from 1969, the year I was born. So, I mean, I would, if I could only own one Neil Young album, I might very well make it this album. You've got Cinnamon Girl, you've got Down by the River, you've got Cowgirl in the Sand. Of course, if you only know Neil Young from like FM radio or the compilation, you know a lot of these songs already. Of course, Neil Young has been very prolific. I could have done more than 3 decades with him. But we'll move on up to the 1970s. This one, since I wanted to do Neil Young with Crazy Horse, I'm going to pick from 1979, Live Rust. I am not yet a Neil Young completist. I'm toying with the idea of becoming a Neil Young completist, at least in terms of studio albums. Archives, no way am I going to do that. So anyway, we got Live Rust, which of course is a live album. So some of his hits and some of his songs that were recent at that time period. So you got stuff like A Lot of Love, which was covered by people like Juliana Hatfield and Nicolette Larson. You've got Sugar Mountain, Comes a Time, After the Gold Rush, The Needle and the Damage Done, Cortez the Killer. So a lot of my favorite Neil Young songs are on this record. And then the weird decade for Neil Young was the 1980s. He went to Geffen Records and he made David Geffen and a lot of his fans mad by releasing weird albums. The one I'm showing, because it's with Crazy Horse, is the album Life from 1987. I think this is the last one he made with Geffen. I think Geffen was sick of him by then, with him releasing Trans and the country record and the rockabilly record and this record. It's certainly not a must-have Neil Young record, but I don't really think there are too many bad Neil Young records. Then, of course, if we went on beyond in decades, the 90s, I've got a lot of it on CD. I've actually ordered that box. So I'm going to get some of that on vinyl, the stuff that's a little bit harder to pick up used on vinyl. 2000s, I don't actually have anything by him, but I have some recent stuff by him from the 2010s and 2020s. All right, so the second group I'm going to show is the group Mudhoney. Now, if you've been watching other people's videos about this, and I haven't watched everybody's videos, so somebody may very well have done Neil Young. I wouldn't be surprised because he's a very prolific artist, and lots of people in the VC have lots of his albums, and that would be fairly low-hanging fruit for this thread. But Vinyl Richie did a great one where he showed bands like Cockspar, who I don't own anything by. L7, I would basically be showing the same L7 albums he showed, or Mudhoney. And so Mudhoney, I'm going to show 3 albums that Vinyl Richie didn't show in his particular video. So he started with the 80s with Mudhoney. I'm actually going to start with the 1990s. This is my favorite Mudhoney album. This is Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge, which was the last one on Sub Pop before they went major label for a while. This is an anniversary reissue from fairly recently. So it's got tons of bonus tracks and the like on it, demos and all that garbage. I had this on CD from back in the day. Generation Genocide and Let It Slide and Into the Drink and March to Fuzz, Fuzzbuster and more fuzz and fuzz gun, and it's very fuzzy, super muff, big fuzz, all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, Mudhoney was kind of strange in the 2000s, so I've got a loser edition. Mudhoney, Under a Billion Suns. Vinyl Richie showed the one that came out before this one, so the Mudhoney, Every Good Boy Deserves Fudge was from 1991. Under a Billion Suns, this is from 2006. The album that Vinyl Richie showed was from 2003. And this is when Mudhoney was being probably at their most experimental, using synthesizers, using saxophones, other sorts of instruments that you would not. Mudhoney, you're thinking, okay, it's traditional guitar, bass, drums, effect pedals, distortion, but they're not messing around with other instruments. But they did mess around with some other instruments on some of these albums, and this is some good stuff as well. So Where Is the Future? The first song on here was pretty good. Hard On for War. Timeless message about idiocy by our leaders. And then, of course, we've got from 2013. This is probably my favorite of the latter-day Mudhoney albums. This is called Vanishing Point. It's got great songs like What to Do with the Neutral, I Like It Small, The Only Son of the Widow from Maine, Douchebags on Parade. I actually saw them play live at the Third Man Records Blue Room in Nashville on this tour. There is one of those Third Man live records of Mudhoney was recorded. I was at that show that it was recorded at, but I'm showing just the studio album Vanishing Point that a lot of that material came from. And the third and final band I'm going to feature is going to be the rockers from Olympia, Washington, and later Portland, Oregon. In fact, by the time we've got, this is a scene from Portland, Oregon, before it became a war-torn Beirut-like sort of location. So this is Sleater-Kinney the Hot Rock from 1999, a reissue on Sub Pop. One of my favorite of the earlier Sleater-Kinney records, and generally I like Sleater-Kinney when Janet Weiss is playing drums. The earliest stuff with other drummers and the later stuff without Janet I'm not so fond of. Of course, everything by Sleater-Kinney has Corin Tucker and Carrie Brownstein in it. Carrie Brownstein is hailing a cab like she's in New York City here. And so you've got The End of You is a great song on this particular record. Start Together, Burn, Don't Freeze, God is a Number. First side especially very good. And then a few years later, 2002, this is actually my favorite Sleater-Kinney record. I don't think that's a standard choice. Another one that was a reissue that I had on when I originally bought it. When the album came out, I was in CD mode at that period. This is called One Beat. So you've got, I think, Light Rail Coyote might be the best Sleater-Kinney song ever. Sympathy is a great song. Combat Rock. And so there they are. Of course, the one that came out after this, The Woods, is probably their most well-known record, but I actually prefer One Beat. And then they went on hiatus, and then they came back in the mid-2010s. 2015, in fact, I saw them on this tour. They released their comeback record, No Cities to Love. It's an annoying trifold. So you've got the three members. You've got songs like A New Wave, No Anthems, Give Me Love. And so I thought this was a very strong comeback. And then after this, Corin and Carrie kind of drifted into less interesting material, in my opinion. Janet left the group, and I'm not really wild about anything Sleater-Kinney's done after this, but No Cities to Love from 2014. I think this goes right along with those solid records from the mid 90s to the mid 2000s, which is the essential part of their discography. So there you go. I showed you some Neil Young, my favorite boomer artist. I showed you some Mudhoney. I showed you some Slater Kinney. And probably next week I'll show you some crap I dug up in an antique mall.